Barron Trump sat in the back seat of a black Cadillac Escalade, watching the New York City skyline grow closer. The towering buildings of Manhattan stood like sentinels against the morning sky. He adjusted the cuffs of his navy blue blazer, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. Today, March 20th, 2025, was his 19th birthday. Unlike his previous birthdays, extravagant parties, high-profile gatherings, and endless media coverage, this year, he had chosen something different, something deeply personal. His destination? Mount Sinai Hospital. For the past few months, Barron had been obsessed with one thought: finding the woman who had brought him into this world, the nurse who had held him in her arms, cleaned him, and whispered his first words of comfort. It was a strange thought, yet it tugged at his heart in ways he couldn't explain. "Are you sure about this, sir?" asked James, his security agent, from the front seat. "We can arrange a private meeting if needed. No need to walk into a hospital unannounced." Barron shook his head. "No, James. I want to do this myself." His father, Donald Trump, was now serving his second term as President of the United States, and his mother, Melania, had raised him with a quiet yet firm sense of independence. Though his life had been shielded by security, politics, and expectations, he longed for something real, something that connected him to the world outside the White House. As the SUV pulled up near the hospital, Barron took a deep breath. He had no idea what he would find inside, nor if the woman he was searching for even worked there anymore. "Stay close, but give me some space," he told James before stepping out onto the sidewalk. The cool spring air brushed against his face as he adjusted his coat and walked through the glass doors of Mount Sinai Hospital. The lobby smelled of antiseptic and freshly brewed coffee. Nurses in blue scrubs hurried past, doctors discussed patient charts, and families waited anxiously in chairs. Barron approached the front desk, where an elderly receptionist looked up from her computer screen. "How can I help you, young man?" she asked with a warm smile. He hesitated for a second, then spoke. "I'm looking for a nurse who worked here in 2006. She was present during my birth on March 20th of that year. Her name? I don't know it, but I was born here." The receptionist raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "And your name?" "Barron Trump." Her eyes widened slightly as she realized who was standing before her. The son of the President of the United States was asking for an ordinary nurse. She nodded slowly. "That might take some time, dear. Records that old aren't digital, and many nurses retire or transfer to other hospitals. But I'll check what I can." "Thank you," Barron said sincerely, stepping back. As he waited, he walked toward a quiet corner of the lobby, his mind drifting. He had seen photos of his birth in the archives of the White House, but they were all focused on his parents. His mother holding him, his father smiling proudly. But no one had ever mentioned the nurse, the woman who had been there for his very first moments of life. A few minutes later, the receptionist called him back. "I found a name that might match. A nurse named Linda Carson was on duty in the maternity ward that night, but I'm afraid she retired 5 years ago." Barron's heart sank slightly, but he wasn't ready to give up. "Do you know where she is now?" The receptionist hesitated before lowering her voice. "She left the hospital, but some of the staff kept in touch. I believe she lives in a small apartment in the Upper East Side." Barron straightened up. "Can you give me the address?" She hesitated. "I really shouldn't." He smiled reassuringly. "I don't mean to intrude. I just want to thank her." After a moment, she scribbled something on a piece of paper and slid it across the desk. "This is all I have. Please be respectful." Barron took the paper and nodded gratefully. As he stepped outside the hospital, he looked at the address. It was time to meet the woman who had been there on the very first day of his life. Barron Trump leaned back in the Escalade's leather seat, the slip of paper clutched in his hand. The address, 237 East 72nd Street, apartment 4B, was just a few blocks away. He glanced out the tinted window as the streets of Manhattan blurred past, his heart pounding with anticipation. He had no idea how this woman, Linda Carson, would react when she opened the door to find the president's son standing there. Would she even remember him? Would she welcome his visit, or would she prefer to leave the past untouched? "James, let's head to this address," Barron said, handing the paper to his security agent. James nodded without question and relayed the location to the driver. Although Barron's request was unusual, his team knew better than to push back when he set his mind on something. As the car turned onto East 72nd Street, the neighborhood's quiet elegance stood in stark contrast to the bustling city. Rows of brownstones and upscale apartment buildings lined the street, their windows reflecting the pale morning sunlight. When the car rolled to a gentle stop, Barron took a deep breath. "Wait here," he instructed his security team. "I need to do this on my own." James hesitated. "We'll stay close, sir." Barron adjusted his coat, stepped onto the sidewalk, and approached the building's entrance. The intercom system was old but functional. He pressed the button for apartment 4B and waited. A few seconds passed before a crackly voice answered. "Yes." Ms. Carson? My name is Barron Trump. I was born at Mount Sinai Hospital in 2006, and I believe you were the nurse who was there during my delivery." His voice, usually composed, trembled slightly with nerves. Silence. Just as Barron began to worry that she might hang up, the buzzer sounded, unlocking the door. He pulled it open and stepped inside, his heart thudding in his chest. The elevator creaked softly as it carried him to the 4th floor. When the doors slid open, he found himself facing a narrow hallway. At the far end stood a plain white door with a brass 4B fixed above the peephole. Gathering his courage, Barron knocked. The door opened slowly, revealing an elderly woman with soft gray hair pulled into a loose bun. Her face was lined with age, but her eyes, warm and sharp, studied him carefully. She wore a simple lavender cardigan over a pair of faded jeans, and her hands trembled slightly as she leaned on a wooden cane. "Barron Trump," she said softly, almost to herself. "Well, this is a surprise." Barron smiled hesitantly. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted to meet you. I wanted to thank you for being there when I was born." For a moment, Linda simply stared at him as if trying to reconcile the tall, composed young man before her with the newborn she had once held in her arms. Then, to his relief, her face softened into a smile. "Come in, child," she said, stepping aside. The apartment was modest but cozy. Sunlight streamed through lace-curtained windows, casting soft shadows on the walls lined with books and framed photographs. The air smelled faintly of lavender and fresh coffee. As Barron took a seat on a worn but comfortable couch, Linda settled into a recliner across from him. For a while, neither of them spoke. "You're taller than I imagined," she said with a chuckle, breaking the silence. Barron laughed softly. "I get that a lot." Linda tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. "Why did you come looking for me, dear? After all these years?" He hesitated, searching for the right words. "I guess. I've always wanted to know the person who was there for my first breath. My life has been so public, so controlled, but you were there before any of that. Before the politics, the spotlight." He leaned forward slightly, his voice growing softer. "I wanted to find something real." Linda's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I remember that night," she said quietly. "Your mother, Melania, was calm but nervous. Your father paced the floor like any new father would. And you were such a quiet baby. Barely even cried when you were born." She smiled wistfully. "I held you while they cleaned you up. You opened your eyes and just stared at me, as if you were trying to understand everything already." Barron felt his throat tighten with emotion. He had spent his entire life surrounded by people who knew his name, his family, his future. Yet this woman, this ordinary nurse, had known him at his most vulnerable, before the world had any expectations. "I wanted to thank you," he said softly, "for taking care of me, for being there when I had no voice, no name. You're a part of my story." Linda's hand trembled as she reached for his. "You don't owe me thanks, Barron. I was just doing my job. But it means more than you know that you came to find me." For a moment, the weight of the world fell away, and Barron Trump was simply a young man connecting with someone who had once held his entire life in her hands. As the sunlight bathed the small apartment, it felt as if something long left unfinished had finally come full circle. The room was quiet, save for the faint hum of the city outside. Barron Trump sat across from Linda Carson, absorbing every word she spoke. Her voice, soft and steady, carried the weight of years spent caring for others, lives she had touched without expecting anything in return. Linda shifted slightly in her chair, her fingers curling around a delicate porcelain cup. "I worked as a nurse for almost 35 years, she began, her eyes distant with memory. "I saw thousands of births, but I always remembered yours." Barron tilted his head, curiosity flickering in his gaze. "Why mine? Was it because of who my father was?" A soft laugh escaped her lips, shaking her head. "Not at all. To me, you weren't Barron Trump, the president's son. You were a baby, a fragile, beautiful life beginning. That night, your parents were just a mother and father like any others. And you had these big, watchful eyes? She smiled, her expression softening. You didn't cry the way most newborns do. It was like you were studying the world already. Barron chuckled, leaning back in his seat. I guess I've always been a quiet observer. Linda sighed, her hand brushing a silver-framed photo on the side table. I loved my job, but I retired when my arthritis got worse. Couldn't move around the way I used to. Her voice softened. After I left the hospital, I often wondered about the babies I helped bring into the world. What kind of lives they'd lead. I never imagined one of them would come looking for me. Barron hesitated before asking, did you ever think about reaching out? Linda shook her head gently. Your family, they were in the public eye. I didn't want to intrude, but I kept a memory box, a small one, for the babies who touched my heart. You were one of them. Without another word, she rose from her chair, moving slowly toward a wooden cabinet. Barron stood, instinctively reaching out to help her, but Linda waved him off with a soft chuckle. I'm not that fragile, dear. She opened a drawer and pulled out a small, worn tin box. As she returned to her chair, she placed it gently in her lap. I never thought I'd share this with anyone. Barron watched in quiet fascination as she opened the lid. Inside lay a collection of faded hospital bands, old Polaroid photos, and tiny keepsakes. She rummaged carefully before pulling out a small, folded piece of paper. This, she said, handing it to him, was the note your mother wrote to me after you were born. His heart pounded as he unfolded the delicate paper. The handwriting was elegant, the words penned with genuine warmth. Dear Linda, thank you for the kindness and care you gave our son. In a world that moves too fast, you reminded us that life's most precious moments are in the hands of those who truly care. With deepest gratitude, I, Melania and Donald Trump. Barron swallowed the lump forming in his throat. The words felt like a bridge connecting his beginnings to the present. His mother, so private and composed, had left behind this simple, heartfelt gesture, proof that even in the chaos of public life, some things remained deeply personal. I never knew she wrote this, he said quietly. Linda smiled, watching his face. Your mother was gracious. The note meant a great deal to me. She paused, then added softly, you coming here today means even more. Barron felt a surge of warmth spreading through his chest, a rare and unfamiliar feeling in a life defined by appearances. In this tiny apartment, he wasn't just a public figure. He was a person, a child who had been loved and cared for by someone who had no reason to remember him but did anyway. He carefully folded the note and handed it back. You kept all these memories, he said, shaking his head in amazement. Didn't it hurt to hold onto them? Linda's smile turned wistful. No. These memories, they remind me of the good I did. And when life gets lonely, it helps to remember that for a moment, I was part of something beautiful. Barron's throat tightened again. I want you to know your kindness mattered, even if the world never saw it. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them felt heavy with shared understanding of how small acts of kindness, invisible to most, could echo through time. Finally, Barron cleared his throat and leaned forward. Would you let me do something for you? Linda raised an eyebrow. You've already done more than enough by visiting me, child. I mean it, he insisted gently. Anything. Tell me what you need and it's yours. She hesitated, her pride wrestling with the offer. But then, with a soft sigh, she glanced around her humble apartment. I suppose, she began softly, I always wanted to visit the ocean again. I haven't been in years. A slow smile spread across Barron's face. Consider it done. Tears welled in Linda's eyes, but she laughed softly. You're your mother's son, you know. Kindness runs in your blood. Barron felt a warmth that no political victory, no media praise had ever given him. In this small act of gratitude, he had found something real, something that mattered. And in the heart of Manhattan on his 19th birthday, Barron Trump knew that this journey was just the beginning. A week had passed since Barron Trump's visit to Linda Carson's apartment, but the memory lingered with him like a warm echo. Her kindness, her humility, and the simple joy she found in remembering the lives she touched, it all stayed with him in a way no public event or grand celebration ever had. True to his word, Barron had wasted no time arranging a special surprise. With the quiet efficiency that came from years of living under the weight of the Trump name, he made the necessary calls. It wasn't about using power or influence, it was about giving back to a woman who had once given so much. Now, as the Escalade pulled up outside Linda's apartment building again, Barron felt a flutter of excitement. In his hands was an envelope containing the gift he hoped would bring her joy. He stepped out of the vehicle and walked briskly to the intercom, pressing the button for 4B. Who is it? Linda's familiar, warm voice crackled through the speaker. It's Barron, he said, smiling to himself. I've come with something for you. The door buzzed open without another word. As he made his way to her apartment, he wondered how she would react. Would she accept his gift, or would her quiet pride push it away? When she opened the door, Linda's face lit up with genuine surprise. "Barron, I wasn't expecting you again so soon," she said, ushering him inside. She wore the same lavender cardigan, but there was a brighter glow to her expression, a happiness that hadn't been there during his first visit. "I couldn't stay away," he joked lightly, stepping into the cozy apartment. He handed her the envelope, his heart pounding softly in his chest. "I promised you something, remember?" Linda eyed the envelope suspiciously before sliding a careful finger beneath the flap. As she pulled out the contents, her lips parted in shock. 2 first-class plane tickets. New York to Miami Beach. Alongside them was a reservation for a 5-star oceanfront resort, a 2-week, all-expenses-paid vacation. "Barron," her voice trembled as she looked up at him. I can't accept this. It's too much." "It's not too much," Barron said, his voice quiet but firm. "You told me you wanted to see the ocean again. This is the least I can do for someone who was there at the very beginning of my life." Tears welled up in her eyes as she clutched the tickets in her hands. "No one's ever done something like this for me," she whispered. "Not in all my years." Barron smiled softly. "Well, maybe it's time someone did." Linda shook her head in disbelief, blinking away tears. "You have no idea what this means to me. I used to take my husband to the beach every summer before he passed. We'd sit by the water for hours, watching the waves roll in. It was our place, our peace." A lump formed in Barron's throat. "Then you deserve to go back," he said gently. Linda carefully set the tickets down on the table, her hands trembling as she did. For a moment, she seemed lost in thought, memories washing over her like the ocean tide. "You're not like what people say," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "What do you mean?" Barron asked curiously. She smiled, her eyes twinkling with kindness. "People see your last name and think they know who you are. But they don't see this kindness. Your parents raised you well." A warmth spread through Barron's chest. For years, he had been treated like a symbol, a headline, a political footnote. Few people ever saw the man behind the name. But Linda Carson saw him for what he was, a young man searching for connection. "I just wanted to say thank you," he said quietly. "For everything." Linda reached out and took his hand gently in hers. "And I'll never forget that you did." For a few more minutes, they talked about life, family, and the simple joys people often overlook. Barron found himself laughing easily in her presence, feeling lighter than he had in years. As he rose to leave, Linda walked him to the door. "You've already given me so much," she said softly. "But can I ask for one more thing?" "Anything," Barron said without hesitation. She smiled warmly. "Promise me you'll come visit again. I want to know the kind of man you'll become." Emotion tightened his throat as he nodded. "I promise." And with that, Barron Trump stepped out of her apartment, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time, peace. As the elevator carried him back to the ground floor, he realized that his search for the nurse who had been there on his first day wasn't just about finding her. It was about finding himself. Days turned into weeks, but the memory of his meeting with Linda Carson stayed fresh in Barron's mind. Amid the chaos of his father's presidency and the constant scrutiny of public life, the visit had given him a rare, quiet comfort, a reminder of the humanity beneath the headlines. One late afternoon, as spring's warmth settled over Manhattan, Barron found himself scrolling through the photos on his phone. His public life was filled with images of diplomatic events and formal appearances, but the picture that meant the most to him now was a simple one, a snapshot of Linda holding the plane tickets, her eyes glistening with tears of joy. A soft knock on his bedroom door pulled him from his thoughts. His mother, Melania, stepped inside, her graceful demeanor as composed as ever. "You've been quiet lately," she observed, her Slovenian accent faint but familiar. "Something on your mind?" Barron hesitated before speaking. "Do you remember the nurse who delivered me?" Melania's expression softened with surprise. "Linda Carson?" She smiled fondly. "Of course I do. She was kind. Why do you ask?" A warmth filled Barron's chest. "I found her. I wanted to thank her for being there when I was born." For a moment, Melania was silent, absorbing his words. Then she crossed the room and rested a gentle hand on his shoulder. "That was a beautiful thing to do, Barron. It shows you have a good heart." He felt a rare sense of pride, not from the public's approval, but from knowing he had honored someone who had touched his life in a quiet, meaningful way. "I sent her on a trip to Miami," he added. "She said she always wanted to see the ocean again." Melania's eyes glistened with emotion. "Your father and I have always tried to teach you that kindness matters. I'm proud of you." Her words stayed with him long after she left the room. Despite the privilege and power surrounding his life, it was this act of kindness, a simple thank you, that felt more meaningful than anything else. A month later, Barron's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unfamiliar number, but as he opened the message, a smile spread across his face. It was Linda. Attached was a photo of her standing on a sunlit beach, the waves lapping at her feet. She looked happier and more vibrant than he'd ever seen her. "Dear Barron, I cannot find the words to thank you for this gift. The ocean is more beautiful than I remembered, and each wave brings back memories of my husband and the life we shared. Your kindness will stay with me forever. With love and gratitude, Linda Carson." Barron leaned back in his chair, his heart full. For all the power his last name carried, it was this quiet connection, this human moment, that felt the most important. And in that moment, he realized something profound. Gratitude isn't just about saying thank you. It's about making someone feel seen, valued, and remembered. From that day forward, Barron Trump carried Linda's lesson with him. No matter how public his life became, he promised himself that he would never lose sight of the small acts of kindness that made a world of difference. And somewhere, on a sunlit shore, a retired nurse stood watching the waves, knowing that a young man she once held in her arms had not forgotten her.